Hi, good morning. It's Graham Healy from the Healy Report, and it's Friday. We just checked the date, Friday the 27th of February now. Just a couple of points for those who watched I was going to say the State Origin, but the State of the Nation with Donald Trump the other night. That was, apparently went on for 2 hours. I watched, the headlines really. But there were 2 points that stood out, and you can parallel that with the Albanese government in Australia. Number one, when Trump set up, I call them the Democrats. They're not democratic in anything. They're demonized. They're not in opposition. They should all be deported, as far as I'm concerned. In the USA, just like with Albanese, the woke left are actually criminal what they do. So when Trump asks them, do you believe that the number one priority is to protect the citizens of the USA against illegal aliens? Every single one of the Democrats remained seated. In other words, they put illegal aliens and criminals over the citizens of America, and that's exactly what they do. Why the hell these people on the so-called Democrat side are even in Parliament, one would, wonder. It's a bit like with Albo and the mob. And you can draw parallels because the alignment of Albanese's government is exactly with the Democrats in the US. Their alignment is that. They're not aligned with conservative values, are not aligned with Judeo-Christian values. And the other thing that really stood out, and this was, apolitical, Trump had the mother of that young girl that was from Ukraine that was mercilessly stabbed to death in the subway by that, repeated criminal that through the system out in the US was continually bailed out of jail without any, no money required. But he was, again, I believe, an illegal alien, and he stabbed a young girl to death, and everyone saw it on the internet. The mother was there. Trump paid respect to her. Not one Democrat stood up for that mother. Now, that, to me, is, what do you say? If you reflect that mentality back to Australia, who is Albanese protecting? Not the citizens of Australia. No. He's protecting the ISIS brides, and he's a terrorist appeaser. Same mentality, same, basically it's treasonous. And when you listen to a few of the commentators, especially on Sky News, which is doing a relatively good job, like Chris Kenny and Rowan Dean and these guys, regarding the whole Bondi massacre and everything else like that, Albanese's done nothing, absolutely nothing. He's installed a woke so-called judge, lesbian, pro-Mardi Gras judge. I mean, for goodness sake, is this the sort of person who's adjudicating over the mass murder of the Jews, which is basically Islamic terrorism with an Islamic ideology? So you put some, little puppet in doing a quasi-royal commission. The only person who should be doing the royal commission is General Cosgrove, in my considered opinion. But when you look at the parallels between the Democrats in USA and Albanese, they're parallel. So we've just got to remove them, remove Albanese's government. I mean, they're not looking after the security of Australia. You can see it. You don't have to be real smart to figure this out. So they're looking after the security of terrorists. The ISIS brides are terrorists in every way. These kids that they've got who are now 13 have been radicalised, I'll tell you now. They are radicalised there's no way they'll ever assimilate into any society in Australia. In fact, you know, well, hopefully they're not coming here, but they are by apparently, even though Albanese claims not anything to do with it, he's just lying yet again, him and that Tony Burker. So what happens when they get over here? Where do they go? The Lakemba Mosque for more radicalisation? Where do those children go? Do they go into a detention centre, or do they go into the local Islamic school to radicalise others? That's what's going to happen. So I posted a list just recently by someone called the Aussie Legend or something, but they did a very good job in listing all the terrorism attacks listed by the Federal Police in Australia. I think there's 20 odd terrorist attacks, you know, that they've listed. So there's a lot that the Federal Police have stopped and a lot they haven't stopped. And the trouble with Australia and the system is not the Federal Police, it's a government in control, that they're reactive and not preventative. To be preventative, every single hate preacher that was on the street in Sydney after the massacre of the Jews on, you know, the 23rd of October 2023, we had these well-known characters, the Islamic hate preachers, on the streets in front of Sydney Opera House celebrating the mass murder of 1,200 Jews plus 250 hostages. So these characters are already on CCTV. Why aren't they arrested? You've got to ask yourself. Who is Albanese's government protecting? Well, it isn't you and me. It isn't the Australian citizen. And the opposition didn't have any guts to do anything anyhow. And I mean, Angus Taylor's doing something, but, you know, to me, he's a non-event as well, you know. It's got to be, the Liberal Party has to be taken over by Andrew Hastie, I believe, and maybe Jacinta Price and et al. Can contribute something to that. But its current format is just, you know, another hocus pocus. Look, oh, we're going to stop immigration, we're going to stop this. They're not stopping anything because they haven't done anything about it for the last 2.5 years. They haven't stood up against it until the Bondi event. I mean, with all these, you know, so-called free Palestine marches, where was the opposition then? They said nothing. So, or maybe Cash, Senator Cash might have said a few things, and one or two of the National Party. But at the end of the day, right across the board, they just remain silent as the Albanese government. So, you know, as one commentator said, I think it was on Sky News, is absolutely correct, that when the massacre of in Israel, the 1,200 people were massacred and all the 250 hostages were taken on the 23rd of October, the very day after, there were celebrations in the streets by these hate preachers in Australia, all on CCTV. We know what the characters are. They're publicly visible everywhere. The question you've got to ask is, why weren't they arrested immediately? Why weren't they deported? What, are we all waiting for them for another Bondi massacre, are we? Are we waiting for that in New Year or one other public holiday, or maybe Easter? That's the holidays that these characters attack. You know, Easter, Christmas, you know, the Judeo-Christian holidays. And one comment, I'll leave you with this. Before the so-called free Palestine, which is just complete Hamas propaganda, before anything happened, before even Israel responded to the terrorism attack, which they have every right to, any country attacked by terrorists have every right to respond, right? And they responded proportionately, by the way. Only 80% of the casualties in their response were Hamas terrorists. Thank God for that, eh? Getting rid of the terrorists, that's great. 20% civilians, and that just happens. But you remember the terrorists put civilians, see the civilians are radicalised as well. You've got to remember that in Gaza, Hamas governed Gaza with all their terror tunnels for over 10 years, I think 10 to 15 years. So that was the but That was the regime that was running Gaza. And the other thing I keep saying is, notice that with so-called refugees, which these will be radicalised terrorists, basically, no matter what form they take. None of the Islamic countries around the border of Gaza took any of them, especially Egypt. Big wall between them and Gaza, soldiers on top of the wall. No one got across that wall. No other area, no other Islamic area around Gaza took anyone, except silly old Australia. So we are seeding ourselves with terror. So when the comment, I'll leave you with this. Before Israel responded to anything after the 23rd of October 2023, there was this insane, basically Islamic hate preacher / terrorist response in the streets of Sydney. Nothing was done about that. And then very shortly after that, you had these Free Palestine marches. And then, of course, Israel's going to respond. But the propaganda by these terrorists, Hamas, is sucked up hook, line and sinker by the woke left in Australia and other countries. And, to put on top of this, you have that girl, Grace Tame, screaming out global infidata. So what does that mean? That means mass murdering Jews by terrorists. That's what that means. Why wasn't she arrested? It's called incitement. Go on to the Attorney General's website and just bring up peaceful protest. You have a right to protest in Australia, peaceful protest, but you do not have a right, legal right, to incite violence. Now, every one of these Free Palestine marches was inciting violence. Terrorist flags, photographs of the Ayatollah Khomeini, globalise the infidata, all these words they're using. And most of them were from, the leaders of it were Islamic terrorists. The Hezbollah flags, the ISIS flags being flown, all this sort of stuff. Hamas flags being flown in Australia should have immediately been shut down, arrested. But they were allowed to fester that cancer publicly, in public, the iconic positions like Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, trying to get across the Storygate Bridge and everything, trying to bring an international attention to the Hamas agenda. And they were reasonably successful at it. Why? Government did nothing about it. Albanese should be tried for treason, especially him and Burke and Wong as well. They should be tried for treason. They are working against the safety and security of Australia. Albanese's got to go. We put up with another 2 years of Albanese. This place will become a Islamic caliphate very shortly. It's on the way if we don't stop it. So, one nation's going all right. I understand that. They're the canary in the coal mine. Opposition, and I don't see much in Angus Taylor at all. Until Andrew Hastie takes the reins, and with the Royal Commission, you've got to have General Cosgrove running that. And we really have to come down hard legally on any Islamic hate preachers. They've got to be deported immediately, detained and deported. And we've got to stamp this out in this country. If it's allowed to continue, it isn't the majority of Australia who thinks like that. I mean, Pauline Hanson really is voicing the majority voice of Australia. This is what the average Aussie thinks. Crikey, we don't want terrorism here. We don't want these ISIS brides here. We don't want people shooting people in the streets who are motivated by what's written in the Quran. 150 verses of jihad. You read it yourself. Kill the Jews, kill the infidels, kill everyone else that doesn't belong to the death cult. This is something that we've got to, it's not, diversity ain't our strength when it comes to radical Islam. Have a look around the world, see what's happening, and they're destroying every Western culture they touch. They're like a cancer. So this is not talking about the individual, this is talking about the ideology. And unfortunately, there can be good and bad Muslims and all the rest of it, but the ideology is a dark force that takes them over. And let me leave this conversation this. The president of Turkey has said, quote, and you can just look online, no such thing as a moderate Muslim. If someone claims to be a moderate Muslim, they're not a Muslim. See, a Muslim adheres to the Quran. The Quran tells them that anyone outside the death cult is to be annihilated, and usually starting with the Jews. And why is that? The reason is this: because the Jews' inheritance is the Holy Land. It's a spiritual war at the end of the day where evil forces, dark forces are against basically the soldiers of light. You can see that in the state of address by Donald Trump. You know, when he set up the Democrats very, very well, you know, setting up those who agree that illegal aliens shouldn't be in the country and that we've got to protect the citizens of America. So none of the Democrats stood up. So that tells you volumes. They should all be deported, I reckon. And then when the cruncher was when it came to paying respect to that lady who had a daughter mercilessly murdered on the subway by a illegal alien, basically, and everyone else was paying respect, none of the Democrats stood up. This is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with, and Albanese's party's the same. They're parallel with, they've got the same philosophy as the Democrats over in the US. You're dealing with a very dark force that controls them. I'm not talking about the individual. The individual of Alba's just a puppet really in the big picture. But this dark force, which doesn't have any moral compass at all, that doesn't stand up when people get murdered out of respect, that doesn't think that the protection of the citizens of either Australia or America is a priority. You can see that with Albanese. He just lies, you know. Oh, we've got nothing to do with bringing the ISIS brides in. They had everything to do with that. They planned it. They organised passports. Tony Burke was behind it all the way. Everyone can see that. They should be tried, both of them, for treason. That's Graham Healy, or basically the Truth blog these days, prophetic and political, on Rise Up Australia Brisbane 2025. Go onto the website. You'll see a lot of prophetic and also political statements there, and a lot of truth there that is backed up by facts and figures, backed up by people who actually know what they're talking about, not just stupid hype with brainless people talking about global infodata and all this and don't understand what that actually means on a global scale. Okay, have a great day, and we've got to get rid of this government. Over and out. Have a great day.